Good morning and welcome back to Covenant of Grace TV. I'm Reverend Ron L. Spratley, Pastor Emeritus. Today we're going to continue with our prophetic soundbite. We've been teaching on the doctrine of suffering. This is part 4. We've been talking about the biblical reasons for suffering. Go back to our definition. We said suffering is a product of the fall of man in the Garden of Eden, and it's the consequence of human sin against Yahweh. Suffering implies overcoming pain, distress, sickness, poverty, or loss, etc. In our first 3 teachings, we talked about the biblical reasons for suffering. We said to learn obedience to Yahweh's divine plan. The second reason we talked about to develop patience and endurance. Last week, we talked number 3, to resolve the angelic conflict. So we see we need to look at these reasons on an aggregated basis to get a complete understanding why it happens according to the Bible. Number 4, today we're going to look at suffering for righteousness' sake. 1 Peter 3:14, 17, 18. And if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. 17 and 18. For it's better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for what well doing than for evil doing. For Christ also had what once suffered for sins. Look at this, the just for the unjust. Okay? That he may bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened or made alive by the Spirit. So number 4, today, suffering for righteousness' sake. We see what our main scripture has taught us about that today. Peter wrote to encourage believers who were being persecuted only because they followed Yeshua. They were being persecuted only because they followed Christ. No other reason. Okay, the deepest faith trusts God's grace regardless of life circumstances. The deepest faith, not a shallow faith, the deepest faith trusts God's grace regardless of life circumstances. We must pass from questioning God with why in our soul to trusting God with our spirit. Look at Luke 9 and 23. And he said to them all, to his followers, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, all right, and take up his cross daily and follow me. Your cross is a symbol of suffering, persecution for following Christ. During these modern day times, as we try to do ministry work, some of the ways we suffer for the sake of righteousness, right? Through criticism, okay? Through lack of support for ministry work, okay? Falling away people who are not interested in ministry work and the work of the church. There's a great falling away that's taking place. But those of us who are part of the remnant, we must do our part and suffer for the sake of righteousness, okay? So that the work of the Lord can be done. Even though we may be criticized, even though we may not get support, We have to march on and do the Lord's work. Let's continue. Talk about the law of essential opposites. Without suffering, there would be no need for love and compassion. That sounds like an oxymoron. But if there was no suffering, we wouldn't understand the need that we have to love each other, to have compassion for each other. We need each other. You hear me say all the time, none of us have enough skills in and of ourselves to keep ourselves alive by ourselves. We need help. We need skills from other people to help us. So we need each other. We need to learn to appreciate the absence of suffering and not become complacent, right? Suffering, it brings us closer to God. God cannot get close to us if everything is always wonderful. And you know, some of us don't even call on the name of the Lord until trouble comes. So you know what we're saying here is true. Our key principle, without suffering and sacrifice, there can be no progress in society. Somebody has to be willing to pay the cost, to pay the high cost of discipleship. I want to thank you for your time, my brothers and sisters. May God bless you till we have an opportunity to bring you a word once again.